As I record this video, I am soon to be turning 30. And it's interesting how often our plans or expectations for a new year don't always line up with how things have unfolded. It's like every time it's a birthday or it's New Year's, we're like, this next year is going to be the year or going to be my year. Instead of realizing that it's probably going to be another year of steady improvement along wherever we're progressing. But that's not to exclude times when things just sort of clicked with us for the first time, where it's like we've been putting all the steps or thinking in certain patterns and like we suddenly get that moment of clarity, or we start to see our vision become concrete in a way. And maybe that's simply because someone else has either adopted our vision, or maybe it's that we suddenly hear that we aren't crazy for thinking certain things the way we do. And it's like how oftentimes we are like have this thought or this idea in our head, and it's like we're reading a book and it's like, wait a minute, that's what I think, and it's like that validation in a sense. So it's kind of interesting to see things that happen, because again, there's kind of that thing of small steps leading up to actually the big changes, instead of like the big changes happening overnight. It's like there's a lot more that goes into it than just the sudden moment that things just seem to all happen and be unveiled. But I say all that to say basically that I've decided to start reading a certain book. And it's one of those books that, at least for me, you always hear a lot about, but you may have never read for yourself. And again, I've heard a lot of mentions of this title, or at least I've seen the title mentioned, but it's like very rare that I've heard people actually talk about the content personally. And the book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And it's very interesting because of that. And there are two examples that have really stuck out to me so far, even though I'm still in kind of the beginning stages of it and kind of reading it slowly. There's actually a method they recommend reading the book in, so it's kind of interesting in how different it is. But I want to share those two examples because they not only have relevance to this channel, but also to my life and my desire to be a storyteller. Now, the first is Carnegie's own experience, which I'll relate by reading it. I once took a course in short story writing at New York University, and during that course, the editor of a leading magazine talked to our class. He said he had picked up any one of the dozens of stories that drifted across his desk every day, and after reading a few paragraphs, he could feel whether or not the author liked people. If the author doesn't like people, he said, people won't like his or her stories. This hard-boiled editor stopped twice in the course of his talk on fiction writing and apologized for preaching his sermon. I am telling you, he said, the same things your preacher would tell you. But remember, you have to be interested in people if you want to be a successful writer of stories. And it's just sort of one of those kind of stories, or in a sense that is like a writer being interested in people. It's like one of those things that doesn't really jive with our view of writers in a sense, but once you really think about it, it makes perfect sense why it should be the general taste. We often have this image of a writer being inanimate or a recluse, maybe living in a mansion or a cabin, and they're just always writing or typing or whatever, and they don't really have to interact with people. But yet, when it really comes down to it, how do writers know to create interesting characters? It's like they actually have to be able to like people who are different from themselves. Otherwise, you often end up with the taste of where all these characters may have different faces, but they all have the same voice. They're all talking like the writer. Or maybe they're all simply espousing the writer's perspective or opinions they want to put forth. And so they're all sounding the same, or they're all saying the same things from the same perspective, rather than actually having any nuance or different perspectives in there. And so it's one of those things that can only come from actually liking people and having interaction with them. We actually realize that people have different perspectives, that things aren't always clearly lined up like that, that we don't always all think the same way. We don't always do things for the same reasons. And so it's sort of one of the, again, I'm basically saying that it's one of those things that makes perfect sense once you really think about it, and why a writer should have general interest in people. It's like we may think, and again, I don't think anyone really, we may all like our alone time and time with people in different levels, but we probably all need at least a bit of them. So it's just one of those things to really think on. But anyway, the second example is a habit that set the magician Howard Thurston apart from others. And whereas other magicians might kind of look at their audience and be like, oh, I'm going to make so much money off these gullible people. Instead, Thurston would basically, before he would perform, would repeat, I love my audience, over and over to himself to put himself in the right mindset. And it's sort of almost one of those things where it's like, that actually makes complete sense. Where it's like, how does like the magician make the money? They make the money off the audience coming to see them. And again, he had that mindset of the audience is coming to see me. They are actually here for me. So why wouldn't I love them? And so it's kind of that thing. And again, they're providing what he needs. So why shouldn't he give them their money's worth in a sense? Why shouldn't he perform to the best of his ability for the audience that has come to see him? And it's just one of those perspectives that is really kind of changing and actually refreshing these days. And even both of these are refreshing perspectives because so oftentimes I see kind of news of another audience being blamed for either backlash against some company's newest project or because they aren't exactly how a creator wanted them to be, or they aren't the right audience that they wish they had, or however you want to put it. But it's like always blaming the audience, never like, I can do better, or this is for the audience. It's just kind of negative in a way. Maybe that's why you see it. It's like, it's very easy to point out the negative than the positive examples of it, but it's one of those things that just kind of gets to you after time. So it's sort of refreshing to see the opposite be proclaimed. But imagine that writers had to follow a commandment, love thy audience. What sort of stories would be at the top of the crop? What would the ones that were being promoted be? And what stories would almost never be released? It's just sort of an interesting thought experiment to kind of really think of, especially these days with so many different stories being able to be told with access to the internet and so forth. So it's just something to really think about. If love thy audience was the writer's commandment in a sense. And again, maybe it's just that this kind of concept resonates with my thoughts on things, even if I don't always act it out. And again, that's probably part of it is that we have these ideas that we don't always follow through to completion or to their fullest extent. But then sometimes we have to start with acting it out. We have to start with repeating the mindset we want to have. Again, it's like if you want to love someone, you first show them love. You first act it out. Our feelings may seem like they control us, but really it's our actions and feelings are correlated. So by doing the action we want to kind of do, or we feel like we should do, our feelings will naturally start aligning with it. And you can't really fake the sort of treatment in a sense, though. You have to actually be genuine in wanting to do it. Because people can often pick up a fake, even if the starving will buy the lie for a short time. The truth will be unveiled eventually. Liars get found out all the time. And again, it's like once you've experienced genuine interest and affection in yourself, you know how to spot a fake. It's like with kind of the classic example of bank tellers tell money by understanding the original and so forth. So it's sort of one of those things where you have to be really willing to kind of put in the effort and do it right in a sense, or realizing that it's the mindset and the actual act that matters rather than just being like, oh, I love my audience, except when, or, well, how should I put it? You can't just fake that, oh, I love my audience, while being like the fake and the person who's like, oh, I'm going to make so much money off these people, or however you want to put it, or the people who just sees them as so forth. It's just like people recognize the authentic versus the fake. And that's one of the things that is repeated oftentimes in the book of how to win friends and influence people. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, I just want to say that that mindset of being genuinely interested in people and loving my audience is the mindset I want to have. I want to adopt it. Not only this year, but for the rest of my life. Anyway, well, thank you for listening to my musings for a while, my friend. If you have any thoughts you want to share on this topic, feel free to put them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, you can like and share it so that others may enjoy as well. And if you want to see more videos like this, you can subscribe to our channel so that you can see more. Anyway, I'm Jonah, and you have been watching Lionsmade Media, where we celebrate stories and the lessons learned from them. Talk to you later, and have a great rest of your day.